My name is Keshav Sota, and I'm currently researching curing autism using cows as a model for the curious young writers. In today's podcast, we will be learning more about autism, the current treatments available for people with autism, and more about the oxytocin injection. To learn more, we have Dr. Jain, who is the author of Healing Autism in the Kitchen, and has worked with children with autism and attention deficit hyperactive disorder. She is a board-certified American alternative medical practitioner, a doctor of naturopath, and a certified nutrition consultant. Dr. Jain is the founder of Global Naturopath, where she integrates the finest aspects of the complementary and alternative approach to health and well-being in serving children with special needs. Her practice recognizes the inherent healing capacity within each individual and the role nutrition plays in child's learning, behavior, and health. Dr. Jain, we are very honored to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So, something that many people don't know about autism is that it is a spectrum disorder. So for our listeners, what is autism and why is it considered a spectrum disorder?
Autism was mainly considered as a neurodevelopmental disorder. But when we look at autism biologically, it isn't a one disease. It is a combination of many diseases. There is no one underlying genetic predisposition, but a combination of more than 600 genes which were impacting the children in their own wide ways for causing the disease autism. It is considered a spectrum disorder due to the extreme variability in the traits and the widespread the impact it has on each child individually. And again, this giving in the spectrum, when the doctors were really diagnosing these children were exhibiting such wide range of behaviors on each individual basis. Some children would be having the traits of, say, social communication issues, but again, it would be not too much an intense degree as in some children, and it would be in such degree in some children, but they had to be still giving a diagnosis of autism. So it was very difficult to really tentatively diagnose a child with the disease. So they came up with the idea of really having a spectrum, so where the children could be still under the bigger umbrella of autism, but they could be widespread in a spectrum where they would say high, medium, and probably on the low side of the disease autism. So it was easier to put them on the different spectrum and the spectrum levels just to provide them with more services and understanding where they are. But again, how the way it's individually impacting each child was contributing to the spectrum.
How is this disorder perceived from different cultures, and what impact does it have on a family with a child with such a disability?
It's a very important and a very good question. From the cultural perspective, having a child with disability has always been viewed differently in each cultures. Some where they have more family centered values, there having a child with developmental disability like autism could have a detrimental effect. Some parents really, how from the cultural perspective viewed, having a child with disability has to do with your old karmas from your past life, and how taking care of a child with disability would be a way for you to really make your deeds better. But from if you really look from the cultural perspective, it's different. But again, in itself, having a child with disability is a very big financial, emotional, and I think physical burden on the entire family. Many factors play the role in here. When we say autism now is a biological disorder, really providing different therapies and treatments for a child with autism could have a financial impact on the family. Emotional, you already know that you have a child for whom you have to take care of for the entire life in many cases. And physical, when the parents are themselves the physical caregiver of the children who do have physical impairment. So then it's really a combination. Other thing which we are really not which cannot be ignored is how it stresses on the siblings of children with autism. The siblings themselves have their own struggles where the whole family's attention goes on the child who has his developmental needs beneath the sibling who do need sometimes an undivided attention. So how the whole dynamics of the whole family changes when you do have a child with developmental disability, it's really huge.
So one of the things that I'm sure our listeners want to know is, how has technology impacted approaches to treatment for people with autism?
Great question. And autism is a growing epidemic in the US, at least, as we know. But in my own professional experience, I believe there's a whole generation in making. These children they're exceptionally technology savvy. They they are much. I believe that in spite of their diagnosis and disability they have been given, the technology comes very natural to them. With the advent of iPad, I believe the children who were nonverbal really got a language to speak. For the first time, they really write, and there are so many new apps out there which have really given language to these children who are nonverbal. I specifically remembered a child who was really labeled as starting with severe autism, could never spoke a word, was nonverbal, and really to the point with the mom's constant effort of taking her to different neurodevelopmental pediatricians to really get her complete diagnosis. What is it with him that he can never learn? And to the point where they went to really see that maybe he has mental retardation. When for the first time there was a school which really paired an iPad with this child, the first sentence what this child wrote was, "I'm not autistic." That just says that it's just amazing. For the first time, everybody around really had to view these children from a different perspective. That their learning styles are different, so that's why their mode of communication has to be different now. So I believe with the advent of iPad, has really changed the world, the way these children see the world around them. As well, these children sometimes have auditory processing issues. Sometimes, if they have an issue with taking notes in the classroom, with the advent of smart pens and others around, those technology exist where somebody's taking notes for them and they can come back and listen to at their own pace. So I believe with the advent of technology, it's a blessing on these children and a very important tool in helping them navigate this world.
So, speaking of treatments, there's a specific one that I would like to ask you about, and that's oxytocin. So, oxytocin, which is colloquially known as the love hormone, is an avenue of research that scientists have looked into as a method to help better social behavior and reduce the symptoms of autism. So, what is the overall benefits and impacts of oxytocin intervention on children with developmental disabilities such as autism and such?
As you know, the oxytocin is referred to as love hormone. This is the hormone that's released during the childbirth and lactation, and it is this that helps develop a bond between a mom and the child. The oxytocin has been linked to the biology of forming the intimate emotional relationships. Now, this is something we all know, but I believe when it comes down to children with autism who already have a social disconnect with people around them, it's 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 so crucial that we have some way to really go and make that bond with them. Oxytocin does help develop that bond where they have to develop a trust. I think it really there are so many researchers out there which also says it's a trust hormone somewhere. So it's like I believe that we do need to get into the world of these children where they have such a children, and I would say youth as well, where they have such a disconnect. So this, in my professional experience, I have seen the benefits of oxytocin in especially in children with autism and developmental disabilities with increasing their social behavior. Their eye contacts improved, and I think for the first time they were really looking in the people's eyes around them. They may be their caregivers. They could see around them for the first time. One of the biggest one of the biggest I would say the benefits I've seen is how it helps calm down children's behavior. The children with autism can have some aggressive behaviors, some stereotype behaviors, some repetitive behaviors. The oxytocin intervention has helped them calm down their behaviors, and I think this is the reason why we see more benefits in the social connection as they're more available to make the social bond with people around them. So definitely their social understanding gets better where they can see and interact and develop bonds with people around them. So definitely oxytocin, I believe I have seen that it has helped many children with autism.
What are some research that scientists are doing right now that you hope to see implemented in the upcoming years?
When it comes to autism, it's a growing epidemic in the world. When it comes to US, where I think we have more better accountability and measuring stats, the recent reports released by CDC estimates that we have 1 in 68 children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. This new estimate is roughly 30% higher than the previous estimates reported in 2012, which was 1 in 88 children. So every year we're seeing an increase in more than 30%, which is an enormous burden, both financially on the communities, how to really take care of these young children who will grow to be adults with autism spectrum disorder. There's a great panic in the research scientists and the research community in really identifying the genes involved in causing these children to have this diagnosis. There's a state funding being so much allocated in this area where they can really go ahead and research and pinpoint what is causing the autism to be in such a rise in this country. So I believe that right now, with the researchers, scientists have identified a lot of genes where they really have identified many, many more. Every day they're finding many, many more. So I believe that with the good research out there, with so much money spent in this, I believe that in upcoming years we will be able to have better answers and treatment for these children who've been diagnosed with such an horrendous percentage number every year.
So, our final question for today is, what is a piece of advice that you would give to some of our listeners who may have a loved one with autism?
Autism, from my many colleagues who are psychologists, from their psychological perspective, they believe that has to do something with a person's self-esteem. Children do have lower self-esteem. If you have a child diagnosed with autism, I would suggest, in spite of their disabilities, their diagnosis, I would say love them as an individual. They are young adults who happen to have a diagnosis which doesn't define them. Many a times I just correct parents when they come and say, I have an autistic child. I say no. You should really view this and say, I have a child who happens to have autism. It's just a complete shift in the paradigm. It's like when you have a child with diabetes, you say, my son has diabetes. You don't say, I have a diabetic child. Why would you really define the child's personality as saying that he is autistic? He doesn't have autistic. It happens to be a condition where the child may be thinking and learning in a different way. So there are different ways to teach the child and just give what the child needs. You cannot really go ahead and define the child's personality or a trait by his disability. That's very crucial. As if you really go ahead and separate them with this diagnosis, like every child, they do have an desire. They desire in their heart to really please you as a child to the parents. They work very hard and strive to really please you as any other neurotypical child around. They might have their own disability and issues. If you really still continue to believe in them, and in spite of whatever they're doing, at doing to the best of their capability, I believe they still can reach their full potential. And don't measure their potential with the way you would measure any other neurotypical child. As an individual, anybody's potential is best they can do from the best of their ability. So I believe trust them, love them as any other child around you. Don't define them by their disability, just define them by the way their strengths are. And every child has their strengths and weaknesses.
Dr. Jain, that's some great advice that you have for our listeners, and it's been great to have you on our podcast today. For anyone interested in reading Dr. Jain's works, you can check out her book, Healing Autism in the Kitchen, and to read more stories on how animal research can help humans, you can visit the Curious Young Writers blog at www.curiousyoungwriters.org. Thank you for your time, and see you next week.